Hello, and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, and today our guest is John Servis, trainer of the champion thoroughbred Smarty Jones. As most everyone knows, Smarty Jones was the winner of the 2004 Kentucky Derby and Preakness Stakes, and he is arguably the most beloved and popular horse of a generation. John Servis, welcome to the Drexel interview. Smarty Jones won the hearts of millions of people when he won the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, but it seemed that there was something over and above his ability to win that touched people. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you think, from your point of view as a trainer, there was about this horse that so touched the imagination of people.
I think it was a combination of things. I think the fact that he had, the injury early on was life-threatening, and overcame that. I think the fact that the whole team was basically, blue collar from the streets of Philadelphia. They see Mr. Chapman in his wheelchair fighting emphysema, and
this is the owner.
This is the owner.
Yeah.
And you have a Pennsylvania-bred horse that, there's only been one in the history of the Kentucky Derby.
Is that true?
Win the Kentucky Derby. So, he's a horse that wasn't supposed to do that, and
Yeah.
the fact that he was proving that he might be that good, people really started to get excited about it. And I think that with the war in Iraq and everything that was going on in the country and the election, and it just kind of gave people someplace else to go and to take their mind off of the bad things that were going on.
Okay, yeah, in fact, the comparison has been made to Seabiscuit, again, a champion in the 1930s when people had a lot of things to worry about. And you've heard that comparison,
Sure,
obviously. And I guess also being a small horse.
Yeah, he wasn't a very big horse,
Yeah.
but he was very well made. I mean, his conformation was very good. And I think overall, without the story, I think the timing of everything was the big thing, like Seabiscuit. I just think that when people opened the sports page, they had something to read about that got them excited, and it got to the point where people, when they'd open the newspaper, they'd go right to the sports page. They didn't want to have to go to the things that were going on in the world that weren't good until after they got to read some good things.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful story. John, your father was a jockey,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. So you grew up in the racing world.
I grew up my dad started in the racing business very young.
Mm-hmm.
He actually was a jockey for 11 years, and then he became the manager of the Jockeys Guild for 11 years, and then he became a head judge at the racetrack for 20-some years, and he's retired, but he fills in periodically. So I have a brother that's a horse trainer,
Okay.
and my oldest sister is married to a horse trainer. So
It runs in the family.
it runs in the family. It's in the blood.
Yeah. So you decided very early to become a trainer? I mean, did you set your sights on that, or was there some other aspect of the racing world that you were interested in
Well,
first?
from a very young age, I was in love with horses, and I wanted to be a jockey, but
Okay.
I outgrew that really fast.
At what point do you know that you're not going to be a jockey?
About 14 years old,
Yeah.
I knew that I wasn't going to be the size to be a jockey.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'll be a horse trainer. That sounds like a good way to go. So I talked to my dad and told him that's what I wanted to do, and I thought at 14 I knew what I wanted to do, and so that summer, instead of doing what boys do at 14 years old, my dad sent me to a horse farm in West Virginia and let me start getting my feet wet and seeing if it was really what I wanted to do.
And you've never turned back?
Never looked back.
Yeah. You have been offered, I'm told, to move from your track in Van Salem and go elsewhere, especially since this wonderful experience with Smarty Jones, and yet you've decided to stay on this home turf. Why is that? I mean, what is it about this track that you feel you need to stay with?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the track itself. With the addition of slot machines now, racing's going to get very good at Philadelphia Park. But more so than that, I think it was family. My wife and my kids are very comfortable where we are, as I am. We have a lot of friends in Ben Salem, And my oldest boy's a senior, so I certainly didn't want to, have to move him to different places. And I just felt that I could do just as good a job at Philadelphia Park as I could anywhere else. And if they didn't feel that I was good enough to train the horses at Philadelphia, then so be it.
You wouldn't train their horses.
That's where I was going to be.
So you feel any track will do to train a champion? It doesn't matter where you are, so long as the trainer is good and the horse is good?
Well, I think like Philadelphia Park, I think when you get into the winter months, you have to go south because you just miss too much time training because of weather and the racetrack condition and that type of thing. So if you have a horse on the Triple Crown Trail or on the Kentucky Derby Trail, you pretty much have to go south just to stay consistent and not miss time. But other than that, I mean.
So what's that window? For how long do you
I think
go
around
south?
the first of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Around the first of the year, you need to head south, and it gives you a good 4 months leading into the Derby, and puts you on. You need to map out a schedule and try to stick to that schedule.
Okay. Tell me about what makes a champion horse. I guess one tends to think it's the horse, but obviously it's also the trainer and the jockey. Can you divide up what the percentages are, or what the proportion is as to what makes?
Well, the biggest factor is the horse. Okay. You have to have, the horse is the engine that runs the whole thing, and he has to have speed. Whether he uses that speed early or uses it late, he has to have a very good turn of foot. And then you have to have the team. You have to have the jockey, you have to have the trainer, you have to have the groom. It's not, and the owner. The owner is just as important. I mean, not only, he puts up all the money to purchase the horse or to purchase the mother that has the whatever to get to that point, but, owners have to rely on their trainers to do the job. It's kind of like a football coach. When you have a football owner and he buys a team and he hires a coach, he has to let that coach do his job. If he's going to be second guessing him, then it's never going to work.
Right.
And that was what was so great with the Chapmans, because Mr. and Mrs. Chapman, I mapped out a schedule for them, and they pretty much said, you get us there, and that's all we want. And they kind of sat back and let me do my thing, and I got my team together, and I sat them down, and I said, we're going to go on the road, and we're going to have some good times, and we're going to have some bad times, and we'll go through some times where it'll be a little tough, but as long as we stay focused, I think we'll be in good shape. We got the product.
Yeah, you knew that right away.
We just have to get him there.
Tell me what you knew. I mean, did you know right away when you saw Smarty Jones that he had the potential to be a great champion?
No. He came from the farm, and they were pretty excited about him down there, but he had a sprinter's pedigree. And
what does that mean?
More for sprinting than for distance. Yeah. Okay. And the Kentucky Derby's a mile and a quarter. Yeah. So, when they got excited about it, and you hear that about horses a lot, where he'll come from a farm and they'll say, wow, this horse could really run. But the farther you go closer to a race in their training, you realize that they're not quite as good as everybody thought they were going to be. So Smarty Jones was a pleasant surprise. When we got closer to the race, he actually started to get better. And it was his second race where we actually knew he showed so much ability in the second race that I knew that he had the ability. It was just a question now what we had to do to get him there.
And yet you told me that even in the first race, which was the crucial Arkansas race, you said you saw signs of great things to come, not necessarily in the horse, but in the way things were working out. Could you tell us a little bit about that? The signs that made you feel that this...
That was actually the last race before the Kentucky Derby.
Oh, okay.
But again, when you have one horse on the Kentucky Derby trail, it's almost impossible, really, to get them there.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because they're such fragile animals. Yeah. There's so much that could go wrong. You have the Wayne Lucases, the Nick Zitos, the Bob Baffords of the world. They have 15 horses. Beginning of January, heading for the Derby, and they're lucky if they get one or two there. So when you have one, nothing can go wrong.
And you had just one.
And we had Smarty, and fortunately for us, from January until May, not one thing went wrong. Everything just went picture perfect, and there were signs. I mean, it got to where beginning of March, I started to feel like it was fate, like this was meant to be, and it was going to happen.
Can you tell us a little bit what some of those signs were?
There were a lot of them. Some were spiritual. Some were just little things you noticed. You know, in Arkansas, we had a real cold day one day, and they didn't open the racetrack for training. And I'm thinking, oh man, what are we going to do? You know, we missed this day of training, and it was an important day, and we weren't sure how we were going to handle it. And next thing you know, they announced over the PA system that they decided they were going to open the track 5 hours later in the middle of the afternoon, which is unheard of in our business. You know, usually we're open early in the morning and closed early in the morning, and so that's the first time I ever heard of that happening. With the Arkansas Derby, I had a friend of mine that was a jockey's agent that called me every morning. Smarty Jones ran to wish me luck. And the morning of the Arkansas Derby, which was the pressure race for me.
Why is
because
that?
He had to finish first or second. If he didn't finish first or second, he wouldn't have enough graded earnings to be eligible for the Kentucky Derby. So I was starting to feel that pressure, and I had lost an uncle a year ago, May, that was one of my closest friends. And when the agent called me to wish me luck, he started telling me about a dream that he had the night before about my horse. And the horse was winning, and this guy was next to him rooting and cheering like crazy, and he looked over, and it was my uncle that had passed away. Oh. And when he said that, it was like somebody just took all the pressure off me and said, you know, you got nothing to worry about. You're in great hands, don't worry about a thing. And I didn't. I mean, from that time on, I just went through the whole ride, and you know, I said, whatever happens is going to happen, and whatever doesn't happen, it just wasn't meant to be.
So you feel you were in some ways calmer than you've ever been?
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And yet you had more pressure on you in some ways than you've ever had.
You know, the pressure really mounted up from that point on, and I never felt it. I mean, we went into Kentucky, my horse was training great, and I felt very confident, and I, you know, watching him train, knowing how good he was doing, I said, well, if we get beat, we're just going to get beat because we got outrun. I mean, my horse couldn't be any better, and just, you know, things have to go good.
That's a great story. Now, you told me before that you had never been to the Kentucky Derby before this race with Smarty Jones. Yeah. That's pretty incredible. I mean, you never even been as a spectator.
No.
And that was because?
I don't know if I've missed a Kentucky Derby on TV since I was about 14. But I kind of made a pact with myself that I would not go to the Kentucky Derby until I had a horse to run in the Kentucky Derby. So I stood fast to that, and I had some opportunities to go, you know, as a spectator, and didn't go. And so last year was my first Kentucky Derby.
Wow, and you won.
And we won.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the Belmont, which of course Smarty Jones did not win there, and therefore the Triple Crown eluded him. And that was, I think, a disappointment to many people, I suppose to you.
Yes.
Tell us about how you felt, how the jockey felt, how the owners, the Chapmans, felt after that race.
I was disappointed, not in the horse. I thought the horse ran an absolutely fantastic race. I guess really more for the for everybody in the world. I mean, the horse had just gotten such a following, and I just know what it would have meant for everybody, especially the racing business, the racing industry, if he would have won the Triple Crown. Yeah. So you know, that was in the back of my mind, and I really felt bad about that, and I guess disappointed. Yeah. But you know, I mean, I thought Stewart rode a great race. I thought Smarty ran a spectacular race. Yeah. And like I said before, it just, you know, it wasn't meant to be. For whatever reason, it wasn't meant to be.
Do you think Smarty Jones realized that he lost? Or was there any registering on the part of the horse? He had never lost a race,
no,
right?
I think right after the race, I think he might have. I couldn't really tell if he knew or if he was just exhausted, because he almost seemed like he was kind of depressed. But the next morning he seemed good. The next morning he was bright-eyed and bouncing around the barn like he does after every race. And so, you know, I guess a lot of that was probably fatigue. Yeah. But he's from day one he's been a tough cookie. And I can't see anything like that bothering him. I can't.
Nothing like losing a race would bother him. Birds